raised in Minnesota, and I grew up on this small hobby farm that my mom was a single mom, and she had 100 acres, and we would randomly bring home sick dogs and sick cats, and she'd bring home a horse one day. So I had a very kind of wholesome upbringing where, no one went to the vet, no one went to the doctor. You just kind of wrap something, put a Band-Aid on it, and you're fine. When I was 18, I moved to Minneapolis to go to college and to just kind of get out of this small town. I grew up in a very small town and loved that. I loved being in Minneapolis. I love the city and just being able to walk to, the grocery store and walk to a bar or something like that. And then went to college, got my undergrad in biology. I continued on to worked on getting my master's in education, and just one class shy of getting that. But I just became a teacher after that. So I got my teaching license and taught in high school, middle school in Minnesota for a while. Moved down to Nashville for rock climbing and loved the city, and thought that it would be a good fit for me. And I really liked teaching, so I taught for a couple years high school here, and then I decided to go into real estate. And so now I've just did a complete 180, and now I am in real estate and I sell houses. Dan, my husband, he's a very creative brain. I met him using the Bumble app, which is I think the greatest way to meet somebody, because you can just swipe through all the duds instead of having to meet them face to face. So I met Dan, and he's a chef. He we own a catering business, and he cooks. He's very playful. He's very sweet. He's very encouraging. And together we like to go on biking trips. We like to travel. We enjoy watching goofy movies. We like to tinker around in the backyard and just garden and do stuff together. He's a fun person to be with. He's just a really cool person. Yeah. Yeah. I was probably maybe a small B when I first, just throughout my life. And when I first decided that breast augmentation was what I wanted, was as I was aging and just laying on my sides, I just didn't like my breasts at the time. And so I, kind of in my mind, in a kind of very short thought process, like, oh, I could get a boob job. Like, if I wanted to do that, I could get if I wanted to change how they lay as I age, I don't want them to droop, I could get a boob job. And I didn't really think a lot about it at first. And then I was talking to a friend of mine who is this very Southern, married, has her perfect children. Her family is just this kind of like what you would think of as the Southern, perfect family. And this woman is very conservative and just quiet and sweet. And I just mentioned it to her because we were friends. I'm like, I'm thinking about getting a breast augmentation. And she was, oh, I had one. And I was like, you had one? She said, yeah, I got one right after I had my second child. That kind of like in my mind, it adjusted my thought of all of these kind of flashier women who dress maybe not how I would dress or show off that type of augmentation as much. It adjusted it to, oh, I can just have a breast augmentation and I don't have to just get like those like bikinis that just cover my nipple. Because I'm thinking like Pamela Anderson when I think of breast augmentation. And even when I had told my mom, I'm getting a breast augmentation, and my mom goes, well, are you going to now wear a bunch of low cut shirts? And I was like, no, it's something that I want to do to help. It kind of just changed what I wear. It adjusted how, like, oh, I can wear this shirt now with that normally I would feel masculine in. It adjusted to feeling more feminine in. And it was my own feeling. It wasn't that someone came and told me like, oh, you look like a man in that shirt. It was that when I'm looking in the mirror, I wanted more of a full top than I had. So then when my friend said that she had had this breast augmentation also, I asked her who she used. And she let me see her augmentation and feel it just to see, like if it's something that I'd be interested in. And she turned me on to Dr. Burgdorf. I had been thinking about it for a while. And I didn't want to bring it up to my husband until it was something I really wanted. I didn't want to just on a whim tell him and have his reaction decide for me. I wanted it to be my decision that I'm sharing with him to get his opinion on, and I will consider it. And, kind of going through and seeing what he thought. And then just one day, I remember just turning to Dan and saying, hey, I'm thinking about getting a boob job. What are your thoughts on that? And he was like, yeah. I mean, he just said, yeah. And I was like, that's it? Yeah. And I mean, my husband's more of a butt guy. Like it's not like, oh yeah, I've been hoping you bring this up. He was like, yeah, if that's what you want to do, let's talk numbers to make sure that, financially that will, it's going to be smart. What does the surgery entail? This, safety. Then we got into the details of it, but his initial response was, yeah, okay. I met with Dr. Burgdorf and his nurse. Probably, I was able to get in maybe a couple weeks after that and sit down with them, talk about everything, the process. Dan came with me, and he got to ask his questions. And I think that that's where, after he initially agreed to it, Dan did, that he was able to really get his concerns, answered, or at least talk through it with the doctor and find out if it really is something that's a real threat to like my safety or anything, or if it's not really something that he's seen. Right. Me, on my own, I'm a pretty confident individual. So I do give off this persona of like, yeah, I don't need a ton of support. I don't need somebody to make my decisions for me. So the cost is something I considered. This is one of the first things I looked at, was how much is this going to cost. I initially figured out how much what was required down. So the portion that was down, I talked to my husband about, like, this is what's going to be required to hold the spot for surgery. And then they segmented out the payments. And I want to say that I used maybe like a care credit card, and worked it out that way. And because there was no interest on it, I was fine with that. And I mean, the cost, yeah, I mean, it's a chunk of money, but I also work really hard, and I didn't decide to just go to, the mall and like walking like, oh, I'm going to get a boob job today. Like, I knew the cost. I understood long-term, how that cost could affect me, the maintenance that it could require. And I wanted to do it. I mean, I deserved it. It was what I wanted, and I didn't decide to do it overnight. And my husband was okay with it. I always, anything over $60 we talk about when we're going to spend money. And so this was obviously a cost. I could see that people could think of it as frivolous, that, oh, you don't need it. Well, yeah, you don't need the extra stuff that people get on their cars when they buy cars, or the upgrade of, like, in the bathroom. Do you have a toilet and a sink that work? Great, then that works. But you could upgrade it too. It's just wherever you want to spend your money, spend it. I'm not going to tell you what's right or wrong. I just justified it through, I thought about it, I can afford it, and I'm going to do it. Yeah. I got this book from Dr. Burgdorf prior to the surgery, and it's basically what to expect. And it walks you through everything. And they talk to you about, like, just like mentally what you're going to start thinking, or what they've seen a lot of patients think, like, during that time frame. Um, then day of surgery, I believe he had said to wear something that opens in the front. I want to say that. Maybe that was just something I made up. But Dr. Burgdorf came in, has you sit up and draws the lines for surgery just to mark where everything is so that he knows how to place, I think, once he's doing the work. I felt very like TV, like LA official. I was like, Red, draw me up. I felt like Sex in the City when Samantha had her surgery or wanted surgery. And then they just wheel you off and you fall asleep. I mean, I don't remember much. I woke up and it kind of reminded me of waking up when I had my wisdom teeth out. Like, you just don't really understand what's going on. You're like emotionally like doing something like that, showing an expression emotionally, but you don't feel that. Like, you're crying, you can't understand why, kind of stuff. It's kind of like just the days of waking up out of anesthesia. And then, yeah, I just had to wake up a little bit longer. I didn't feel pain at all. I could tell that I had surgery just because of like that. It just felt like I was wearing kind of like a pillow on my chest, but I didn't feel it. So the overall recovery takes as long as you think it's like, as long as you want it to, I guess, because once you're out of the woods as far as your incision, your stitches are out, let your body heal the way that it will heal. And you can read stories about everybody's different experience, but knowing that yours could be different, and that's okay. Having a nice connection with the nurse is really important. And you then transition into, okay, when are my breasts going to look like what I anticipated them looking like? And that takes painful movement. You have to massage and massage. And then my husband doing his own WebMD searches on like encapsulation and like, we got to keep these puppies moving. So he's like playing around and I'm like, dude, like I'm like 2 days out of surgery. Can you not like bat them like a boxer? Come on. And he's like, this is what we got to do. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to call Dr. Burgdorf. You do not know. You're not qualified to tell me to do this. So yeah, it was, you transition it's kind of these milestones. You get through surgery. It's a milestone. You get through where you can't move your arms. That's a milestone. You know, like you're just hitting all these different milestones. And now I'm to the point now where I'm like, okay, my breasts are pretty much where I want them to be. And now it's like, okay. And now I just have to maintain that, you know, do the massaging so that the encapsulation doesn't happen. I get them checked out by Dr. Burgdorf every year. And it's been 2.5 years since my surgery. And they're now, you know, they bounce and they move, they flow. When I lay on my side, they flop. And that's really what I wanted. I just wanted more volume. The one thing that I've noticed quite a bit after my surgery is I feel like sex is more fun. Like I feel sexual, more adventurous as far as wearing fun things, and I feel it's enhanced what my sexuality, so that it's just changed a little bit. And I don't know if it's just that I get to wear lingerie that has like the you know, like where you can show cleavage more, or what it is, but I definitely find it's changed because of my surgery, and I enjoy that, and I think it's fun to explore sexuality, and I think that that's something to consider, is what your sexuality is like now, and how you interact with your partner or partners, and so I like that, and I think it's a healthy thing to acknowledge. The right time is when you're doing it for you, and that you have thought about it and all the different scenarios, and you still come back to, this is what I want. I get that there's a struggle, and I think that it's really ingrained in females, especially once they have children, to want to care and do everything for their kid or kids. But I think that part of doing for kids is doing for yourself. I think it's important for kids to see that it's okay for others to love and nurture themselves, because then kids will grow up going, oh, I can love and nurture myself, and that might help them create great relationships and really help them to develop wholly as I'm not the center of everything, because kids need to understand that eventually. And I'm not saying like you rip a cheeseburger out of a kid's hand and go and get a boob job, but I'm saying like, you know, if you're happy, your family's okay, you can still go get something for yourself. If I had to do it over again, or I was getting another surgery and it wasn't with Dr. Burgdorf, I had to go with somebody else for some reason, I would research the results for that doctor. I would meet face to face with the doctor if I didn't feel comfortable with the kind of the energy that doctor had. I personally liked how Dr. Burgdorf really tried to get to know what my end result was, so that when deciding how large to go, he could advise me like, this will give you this kind of look. This will give you this kind of look based off of the pictures that I sent him. It wasn't that I felt that I was going to be validated by having this augmentation, or that I was going to somehow have more value than I originally had. It wasn't that. For me, it was I wanted an enhancement. I kind of wore out my natural breasts to where I was like, okay, I've gotten the feel. I got to where, because I loved like they weren't droopy by any means. They were very perky still. I haven't had kids. And so I loved that look, but then I was like, no, I'm ready to try something different.